Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. Well, the good news, everybody. Turns out that when you propose spending $3.5 trillion, it now actually costs nothing. I'm serious. That's the word that actually just came in from the Biden administration about their new $3.5 trillion bill. Ironically, it's the reconciliation process. Like you're reconciling. There's two pieces to this. So how do you reconcile, by the way, the idea that spending $3.5 trillion costs nothing? The short answer is that you can't. But that's okay, because after all, we live in an era of magical math and magical ideas about the world that have no bearing on reality. We're ruled by politicians who live in a fantasy land where money may not grow on trees, but it does come flying off the central bank printer, so it's free, and except for the cost of toner. Now that we've discovered free money, there will be no more poverty. Everyone will just be a billionaire. We'll just print dollars over and over again until everyone can have a private jet. So I don't know why we're not making a bigger deal of this, because this is a major breakthrough. Nobody ever has to work again. You can spend as much as you want. It costs you nothing. And then just print more. We're all rich. In any case, that's what the Biden administration is telling America as Democrats attempt to ram through one of the most expensive and expansive spending bills in history. It's not going to cost us anything to spend $3.5 trillion. Sure. Democrat Congresswoman Jayapal is not good with an Excel sheet and is not a financial advisor, but she is a lifelong organizer. And she's a mom, according to her Twitter bio. So I would love to see how she handles her stuff and how she wants to handle the bank accounts and finances of America. So she wants to tell you that spending $3.5 trillion now doesn't cost anything. I'm serious. Watch.
As I said to the president, and I heard him say, this is a $0 bill because it's all going to be paid for with taxes on the wealthiest corporations and the wealthiest individuals, which, by the way, makes it more popular than it was even before, and it's already very popular.
This is a $0 cost-free $3.5 trillion bill, right? If the idea of spending $3.5 trillion was popular before, she says, imagine how popular this bill is going to be when people find out that it costs nothing. And anyway, says Congresswoman Jayapal, she hasn't heard of a better idea. I mean, really, has anyone free money? Best idea ever. Now, you're probably thinking, this is just a crazy Democratic Congresswoman who probably believes in woke math, like 2 + 2 = 5, because it's unfair if it's just 4. You know what? You're just trying to make all Democrats look bad. You would probably think that, but you'd be wrong. So guess who's also saying that this $3.5 trillion spending bill will cost us nothing? The president himself, who apparently broke out his abacus in the attic and decided to, do some bead math. Here's the president getting all mathematical. He tweeted, quote, my Build Back Better agenda costs $0 instead of that's like a common phrase for the left. Instead of wasting money on tax breaks, loopholes, and tax evasion for big corporations and the wealthy, we can make, this is so stupid. They say this every generation. Multiple times. We can make a once-in-a-generation investment in working America, and it adds $0 to the national debt, end quote. So they're not going to waste money on things like, I'm going to get mad. I'm not going to make it through this. They're not going to waste money on things like tax breaks, which will allow you to keep more of your money. That's your money. That is your money. Letting you keep your hard-earned money. Where do you think you live, America? We're living in the United States of equity now, so catch up. So we're going to get rid of those tax breaks and keep more of your money so we can spend it on important things like tree equity. That's actually what Democrats have in this. So you're asking about tree equity. I'm going to go back to the math and how it actually does not cost $0. So tree equity, I know this is the main reason that you voted in the last election. It was like one of your top priorities. Tree equity is defined as a tree planting program that identifies the cities that can gain the most significant health and economic and climate benefits by increasing the tree canopies in places of high need. So that's why actually you have like all of the crime happening in Chicago and gang warfare and drug deals and shooting with all the gangs and the drug dealers, etc. It's because of a lack of trees. $3 billion of that $3.5 trillion is going to tree equity. I don't even want to point out people in deserts. I mean, if you have more trees than someone else, you're probably a tree supremacist. And if you don't agree, you're just demonstrating your green fragility. Anyway, so since this bill costs nothing, the Democrats have decided to spend the free money on things that do nothing, like electric charging stations for rural areas, because people who live out in the Ozarks, where my family is all coming from, they're not driving Fords and Chevys and GMCs anymore. No, they're driving Nissan Leafs. Leafs or leaves if it's plural. That bugs me so bad. And their charging stations are overwhelmed in places like Oklahoma. I mean, really, you know that cousin Jethro, that he goes down and he gets him one of them EVs? I know you do. I mean, you're pulling up to the Tractor Supply in an EV. I mean, we love fossil fuels. So the rural folks will use them charging stations for sure. That's apparently what Democrats are banking on. And since, there's not too much wrong with being a germaphobe, but there is when you're using it as an excuse for statism, because they have $4 billion for distance learning. And because you're a big fat bigot that doesn't believe in tree equity, here's $25 million for bias training. You got to be trained out of your bias. So rest assured, every dollar of this bill that costs us nothing is super well spent. They actually say in this bill, they actually talk about how tree equity is infrastructure. This is Jen Psaki talking about if spending money still costs something, it doesn't mean anything anymore. I mean, like, we're living in a magical world. Here's Jen Psaki.
This package, the reconciliation package, would cost $0. So what I'm saying, the case we're making here is that there needs to be agreement on the different components. There's broad agreement on the goals, and then there needs to be agreement on what the revenue pay-fors are. There's a range of options for revenue pay-fors. Clearly, the president has laid out the different areas that he would like to invest in, and all of that needs to come together.
See, when Pinocchio lies, his nose grows. And when Jen Psaki is gaslighting you, she gesticulates like mad. Or maybe she's like strangling someone imaginary, I don't know. Or invisible. So again, it's cost us nothing. They're just going to tax the ever-loving hell out of corporations to make up for it. Now, because you were not born a minute ago, you're thinking, wait a second, aren't those mean, nasty corporations? And by the way, do you know how many of them identify as S-corps? Go and look that up and see how many small business people, which drive 60% of the economy, actually register as S-corps, and how they have to pay their taxes and how they don't actually own all of that. That's actually their business wealth, but whatever. Ignorant people who've never ever had to meet payroll determining how corporations and who gets to identify as what and tax structure, that's the way to go. So those mean, nasty corporations that are going to pass the bill on to all of us, that's right. So you're thinking, I've been noticing all my bills going up lately, and everybody's talking about inflation. That means corporations always pass the bill on to the consumer, right? But you know what? Who cares? Because money is free, and there's no bill to pass on. It's all free. They don't care about making money anymore. They care about equity. So here's Jen Psaki again from yesterday, explaining why Joe Biden believes that corporations won't pass the bill on to you. Watch.
There are some, and I'm not sure if this is the case in this report, who argue that in the past, companies have passed on these costs to consumers. I'm not sure if that's the argument being made in this report. We feel that that's unfair and absurd, and the American people would not stand for that.
I feel like that needs to be a whole dance. Just like both of those clips. So there it is. For the first time in history, corporations will not be raising their prices when they're taxed heavily. And because it's absurd and unfair that corporations could pass the costs on to you. How dare they try to feed people? Besides, you're watching them, says Jen Psaki, and they don't need to raise prices to make a profit anyway. She's seen all of their books. Jen knows. And you know what? She's right, because money's free. We already actually established that. The national debt that's at 11 quadrillion. Actually, it's like 30 trillion. You couldn't even, how many lifetimes would it take you to even count that far? It's crazy. I mean, you should actually do the math on that. Can people do math anymore? So you can raise the minimum wage to $100 an hour for flipping burgers and then add a tree equity tax on every Whopper and Big Mac, and corporations are just going to eat that bill. You don't have to pay anything. The administration promises. Now, what Democrats mean by saying that it costs us $0 is that the government can afford it. So let's say that you want a brand new loaded Ford F-150 and you can afford it. Does that mean the F-150 is free? Does that mean the $80,000 you spent was free? Nope, it means that you had $80,000 fully loaded, left your bank account, and it's now sitting in Ford's bank account. That's because you live in a zip code called reality and not in fantasy land called DC. As my friend David Harsani from NRO pointed out, every last penny of the bill is money taken from someone, either today or tomorrow. There's not a single welfare state expansion in our lifetimes that has not undergone some kind of mission creep. I mean, he's writing those. And none of it came anywhere close to estimated costs. He adds, remember when Medicare was projected to spend $9 billion on Part A by 1990? I was in 6th, 7th grade. Well, we ended up with a $67 billion price tag. So it's funny because whenever Republicans talk about tax cuts, Democrats say that it costs us. When they let you keep your money, they say that it costs the government something because the government views that money as their money. And when the government proposes spending $3.5 trillion of your money, it costs nothing. And remember, the US government doesn't create $1 of wealth. They merely tax your wealth and redistribute it to where they see fit, to things like tree equity. So think about that. Why is that even a federal program? You're going to have someone in Philly or someone in Lawrence, Kansas spending money on trees in Philly. No joke. Why? The government can print money, so because for now, we're the world's reserve currency. And of course, now we're essentially printing debt. And so that debt is going to go on our balance sheet of liabilities. And now we've been reminded that nothing is free, especially money, which, as we all know, let's talk about how the $3.5 trillion proposal, how that's going to get paid for. They keep saying, oh, well, it's from the rich. We're going to take it from the rich people. It's like playing Monopoly with a toddler. Just take it from the bank that's there. Okay, well, there's like a system. Take it from the billionaire. You could run the federal government for about 8 months with everything that you take from every rich person ever. That's how much government is spending, which is a quick note on this. The money that you have to give the government in taxes, if the government actually just stopped its spending beyond what it's allowed to do in the enumerated powers, it would be great because then we would run, we wouldn't run a deficit. We would be in the black and not in the red. And our taxes, the government views any kind of tax cut as a giveaway, which is idiotic because that's not their money, that's our money, right? So to pay for this boondoggle, they say, oh, we'll take it from corporations. Why do you think prices are already going up on everything that you buy? Because workers are scarce, there's supply disruptions, and guess who pays that higher bill? You do. And when you hear tax the corporations, know that that really means government is going to pass that on to you. And have you noticed that Democrats are talking up a new and more vigorous IRS to step up the auditing of Americans? More government theft. Isn't it strange that Democrats want the IRS to take money from you when it's free and costs nothing? But yet they really seem to want your money, strangely. I wonder why. What they're proposing as part of this $3.5 trillion bill is to monitor all transactions over at, well, it was $600, but then Democrats realized how nuts they sounded. So now they're trying to go back and forth because we don't even have a final version of this. They're trying to go back and forth and get it to be $10K in your bank account. So if you have $10,000 minimum in your bank account, every single thing that you do, every transaction, the IRS is going to be right up in there in your bank account like Scrooge McDuck sitting on your gold bullions, watching everything that you do. So the middle class who can't afford the high-priced CPAs and lawyers and big corporations and rich can afford to defend themselves. So that the middle class is going to get hit. And how do we know that they're going after the average Joe and Mary? Because the IRS wants to monitor all those transactions. This is they're actually spending $80-something billion to beef up the IRS. More money for the government to increase the government employee section. This is the IRS looking for money in couch cushions. And it also means that they have no idea how to pay for this, right? They want to tax the rich, but here's the fun thing. Do you realize that their tax package that went through House Ways and Means Committee doesn't even come close to covering half of this? So even with this proposal, they're not coming anywhere near covering all of the $3.5 trillion. So they think they're going to try to squeeze and shake people down more. And when that doesn't happen, they're going to gut stuff that they're actually constitutionally obligated to finance. Everyone sits here and they always want to talk about military spending. Look, I'm with you. I don't think military spending is a sacred cow, but it's one of the enumerated powers of the government, Article 1, Section 8. You know what isn't? Tree equity. Move to where the trees are. Jeebus, you can go out. I can go out in my backyard right now and get you a damn acorn and give it to you, and you can plant that sapling. What about people in the desert? What are they going to do? Racists, bigots. I don't know. Isn't that what's usually said? Finally, this idea that we're just going to print money. We're going to print our children into oblivion, bankrupt oblivion. It's at $28 trillion and a half in debt and climbing. Each American, you owe over $86,000 to pay it off. I didn't agree to any of that. Were you? Did you co-sign that loan? Did you co-sign it? That guarantee? I didn't do it. Each day, the interest we owe on the debt goes up by $1 billion, and very soon, interest on the debt is going to be part of the fastest growing part of the federal budget. The clock is real. This is real stuff, guys. And some of those flashy numbers, this $3.5 trillion bill will cost us $3.5 trillion in cold green cash. Money isn't free, and this reconciliation bill isn't free. And the IRS isn't after your money because it's free either. So coming up, Pentagon officials were testifying before the Senate Armed Services Committee on Afghanistan and our disastrous exit. So it doesn't, and again, you have people up there that got other people killed and they're completely unaccountable. But yet if you're a Border Patrol agent at the border doing your job and the media says something false about you, you can be put on suspension. But if you get 13 servicemen killed, you're totally fine. Immune from accountability. John Daniel Davidson, who's the political editor for The Federalist, joins us next to discuss. Stay with us. How much equity do you have in your home? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that the more equity you have, the greater the chance that criminals who are too lazy to go out and get a job and earn their own income will target you. Home title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes, and Home Title Lock, America's leader in home title protection, is warning homeowners that they could potentially be victims and not know it. So cyber thieves can search hundreds of public databases for high equity homes. They can find your home's online title, forge your signature stating that you sold your home, take out loans with your equity. That's insane. Insurance and common identity theft programs will not cover you. Protect your most valuable asset and register your address to see if you could potentially be a victim. Get a complete title history of your home, a $100 value for free. Visit HometitleLock.com. Pentagon officials like General Milley, who wants to better understand white rage, were testifying today before the Senate Armed Services Committee and discussing Afghanistan, particularly the fallout. Why didn't they understand the exit plan? I mean, did someone warn the president? Well, we found out a lot about that. Actually, a lot of things were confirmed. John Daniel Davidson is a political editor for The Federalist. He joins me on this now. John, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you. I wanted to kind of get your reaction to some of the testimony that you heard today from the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. Of course, we have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, and then CENTCOM head McKenzie. What was the biggest takeaway for you from today's hearings and from their answers on these questions?
The biggest takeaway is that Biden was lying to George Stephanopoulos of ABC News in his August 19th interview when he said that none of his military advisors advised him to keep troops in the country and that none of them warned him that withdrawing those troops would trigger the collapse of the Afghanistan military and government. We know now that McKenzie and Milley both said that exact thing would happen and advised him to keep those troops in the country. You just add it to a long list of lies that the Biden administration has been peddling since it took office.
Yeah, I found it incredibly intriguing. I think it was Milley that answered a question, and I was trying to remember who asked him this. There were a lot of really good moments, but he had been asked about that Doha agreement, which really wasn't even in effect, you could say, anymore towards the end of Trump's term, because Trump had already, they were going to have discussions at Camp David. He ended it because, and as we've discussed before, with a conflict, you either win, lose, or you negotiate some kind of peace settlement, and we chose not to win. So we were trying to negotiate some sort of peaceful exit. I mean, regardless of what was going to happen, the question was always about how to leave. And he, unlike Biden, was listening to these military advisors who were like, okay, you can't go during killing season, which, it's kind of a joke. We have pumpkin spice season. They got killing season over there. They go and they harvest all the poppies and they go up in the mountains. And Trump listened. And then, of course, we were still bombing, as I understand it, John. We were still bombing the Taliban even after we signed this agreement. And then, of course, when they wouldn't end the relationship with Al-Qaeda and when they carried out a terror attack that killed 12 people, including an American service member, that's when, from what I understand, the Trump administration said, okay, we're not doing this. It's pretty much done. So why is it that the Biden administration still acts like this agreement was in effect somehow? And even though he didn't have to go by the Paris Accord, even though he didn't have to go by what Trump said for remain in Mexico. John, why are they still pushing this like it existed?
This was something I think that Biden had on his agenda before he came into office. He was going to pull those troops out of Afghanistan. He was going to be the president who ended the Afghanistan war, no matter what the cost, no matter the consequences. He was going to do that. So obviously you have this sort of deeply dishonest way of talking about it and these blatant lies about having to stick to this agreement. And as you mentioned, there is nothing that the Trump administration did, no agreement that the Trump administration reached, no policies that they put in place from the border to anywhere else that Biden felt like he had to abide by. So why this one thing that Biden thought he had to stick with, this agreement from the Trump administration, which, as you say, wasn't even in effect when Biden took office. Now, I think this was a foregone conclusion. Biden was going to do this no matter what the conditions on the ground were. And this is the important part, no matter what his generals said to him. So you have his top military advisors testifying now today that they warned him that this very thing that we all saw happen was going to happen, and Biden just lying about it. Now, if Biden doesn't want to listen to his generals, that's fine. He has every right as president to make a different decision. But he's lying about it, and he's continuing to lie about it, and his administration is continuing to lie about it, just like they lied about the Border Patrol, just like they lie about everything.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. These incredibly unaccountable, and it's weird that in the exact same week, not weird, but very coincidental, in the exact same week that Biden's smearing Border Patrol agents who completely made up. I mean, I guess people who live in D.C. and some of these folks in New York have never seen horses before or split reins or understand Western style riding. These guys are just, bless them, they're doing their jobs. They're trying to deal with the hand that the Biden administration dealt them. And then Joe Biden comes out there, says that they were strapping people. There's going to be consequences to pay. But apparently those consequences don't extend to his own handling, his botched handling of this. And is there going to be accountability? I mean, can Congress even do anything?
I don't know, but I think it's clear at this point that the Biden administration essentially governs by lies. Every important issue, every crisis that the Biden administration faces, they meet it with falsehoods, and in the case of the Border Patrol, abject falsehoods. The video had already come out showing what had happened there on the banks of the Rio Grande. And so when Biden said Biden should have known that he was lying, and I think he did know that he was lying, but he's committed to this line. He's committed to, flattering the pieties of the left wing of the Democratic Party. And so he had to come out and say this abjectly untrue thing about Border Patrol agents that everyone already knew was untrue. The photographer who took those pictures had already said he didn't see the Border Patrol agents whipping anybody. The video had already come out. And so this is governance by lies. And it's born of incompetence on part of the Biden administration.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure we had Milley, I'm looking at some monitor footage of him, we had General Milley who was up there answering questions as well. It's going to be a lot harder to prevent any kind of future terror attack. Well, yeah, we spent 20 years building, surveillance network, on the ground surveillance network. Now we're back to, I don't even think we armed them and then we left. We don't even have on the ground surveillance. All we have to do is rely on satellite surveillance again, which is exactly what we had with 9/11, except we didn't arm them with $86 billion worth of equipment and helicopters and all of this. So Milley says he's not going to resign. Lloyd Austin says, he was asked this, he's not resigning. Some of the answers that they gave, and I'm sure, John, that you heard some of these. Those 13 service members didn't resign, so I'm not going to resign either. Someone said that their grandfather or their father who fought in, XYZ conflict or other wars, they didn't resign. That was such a ridiculous appeal to emotion. I don't know why anyone there didn't laugh him out of the room.
I know. Well, it's what we've come to expect from these jokers. The top military brass of the United States military has shown themselves to be just strivers, career men, bureaucrats, but not committed, soldiers and not men of honor. If Milley and McKenzie and these guys really thought what was going to happen, with this withdrawal was going to end in disaster, then they should have resigned in protest. General Mattis resigned during the Trump administration, and this was part of the reason that he didn't want to be a part of this kind of withdrawal, this kind of wind down in Afghanistan. And you can agree or disagree with that, and a lot of Americans have changed their views over the course of 20 years about Afghanistan. A lot of people maybe who supported it at the outset no longer do or no longer see the point. So it's a fine position to have to think, we should get out of Afghanistan. But the way that this now, went down, what we're learning about how this happened and what Biden was being told behind the scenes and what he decided to do in spite of those warnings and everything that unfolded before a gaping world in Afghanistan, if these guys won't resign for their own honor, then they should be impeached. Secretary of Austin should be impeached. Tony Blinken should be impeached. Congress has got to do something, or they should do something to sort of push back on this incompetence and deception.
Sean, didn't General Milley, after the church was set on fire, the protests that were outside of the White House when Trump was still president, and when he walked out of the White House, I think everybody remembers that photo op because they were accusing Trump of using General Mark Milley as his heavy. And then Milley was saying at one point during one of these testimonies that he had considered resigning in protest from that, but not this.
It's crazy. I mean, but this is the same guy, as you mentioned in your intro. This is the white rage guy. He cares more about social justice in the U.S. Armed Forces than he does about winning wars, and certainly about conducting himself with any kind of honor and integrity. These are men who are at heart, I think, bureaucrats, and that's how they're behaving. They're circling the wagons. They're never going to admit any kind of wrongdoing, and they're never going to take responsibility for what happened. But neither is the president. So it's the sort of falsehoods and the lies and the deception that runs right through the heart of the Biden administration. The media complained about Trump's lies and basically premised their coverage of the Trump administration on this idea that he couldn't, string two sentences together without lying. But Trump's lies, are nothing compared to Biden's. Biden's lies about every single important thing that's happened during his administration has been nothing but lies coming out of his White House. And really obvious and stupid. It's
unbelievable. Yeah, it's unbelievable to watch, especially when, we have the internet, this thing called the internet, and people can put videos. We can see, you mentioned his interview with George Stephanopoulos. I mean, we can literally go back using technology and watch him say that.
I know. And same with the Border Patrol, same with all this other, and now they're coming out and saying a $3.5 trillion bill costs $0. It just insults the intelligence of the American people to do this, and yet they keep doing it.
Yeah, I feel like this administration is sponsored by Brawndo. We live in an idiocracy. That's exactly what it is. I'm just waiting to see. It's going to happen. Oh my gosh, Daniel Davidson with the Federalist. John, thanks so much for joining us. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, coming up, the situation in Del Rio. Apparently, you saw some of the images, right? You saw as close as the drone could get from I think Bill Malugin got us the best coverage that anybody in the country saw. You saw just how massive the crowds were. You saw the drone coverage, but Congressman August Fluger, actually State Representative August Fluger, was there. He was on the ground. He's going to join me next to discuss what he saw. Stay with us. Thanks to Biden's economic policies, job numbers have been abysmal. Inflation skyrocketing. Instead of following the previous president's pro-business agenda that had the economy humming along, Biden wants to tax corporations, pass trillion-dollar bills that we can't pay for and that aren't free. It's time for you to take proactive steps and protect your wealth and your retirement by investing in gold and precious metals. And Legacy Precious Metals can help you. Washington just prints money to pay for ridiculous stuff, but all that does is devalue your dollar. Gold offers you a hedge against inflation, and as the dollar gets weaker, gold gets stronger. So my friends at Legacy Precious Metals, they're the gold standard when it comes to investing in precious metals. They have a team of experts who can counsel you on the best options for you and your family. So don't leave your retirement to chance. Call Legacy Precious Metals at 866-580-2088 or visit them online. Download their free investor's guide that's full of all kinds of info. You can find that at legacypminvestments.com. So how bad was the border crisis? Really is in Del Rio, and it's actually pretty much all over the border, except where the wall is. It seems to be not. You don't have that kind of problem in El Paso like you do in Del Rio. Texas Congressman August Fluger was there, and he has a new op-ed out describing what he saw. He says it's way worse than you can even imagine, and it's really hard to get a gauge on it. I mean, the drone shots are great, but being on the ground there and seeing it, and seeing the crowds for yourself, that's something else. Congressman Fluger serves on the Foreign Affairs and Foreign Security Committees. He joins us now to discuss. Congressman, so good to see you. Thanks for taking some of your time out today. What was your experience there on the ground? Because a lot of folks, they could see from the drone imagery, thousands of people. They saw the people coming across the dam. They would see people lining up. They saw tents and all kinds of makeshift shelters set under the bridge, the international highway there. It's one thing to see it, but it's another thing to be there and actually see the numbers firsthand and witness those conditions. What was your experience?
Well, everything you're saying is true. Typically when you think of refugee camps, you think of situations in other countries that have created them. In this case, it was a situation in our country that created that. And the pictures that you're showing, I was there about 10 days ago on Saturday where it was 100 degrees, and we literally had 15,000 illegal immigrants there, most of them Haitians, who had come to the United States because they heard Del Rio specifically was open. The policies of this administration have directly led to this situation and many others. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the rest of our border and how open it is. But one of the things that really struck me as just so odd is they shut down the bridge, the port of entry, where we have $35 million of economic activity and trade between the United States and Mexico every day. But just 100 yards from there, where you saw that dam, people were crossing back and forth. They were charging their cell phones in Mexico. They were coming back across with ice and water and food for their families. And the conditions were horrific. The troopers and the Border Patrol agents that were there said that at night, that the assaults, the rape, the things that were going on under that bridge were just horrific. And this was all created by President Biden, Secretary Mayorkas, and their policies.
It is amazing to me, Congressman, how that can be considered more compassionate than allowing, for instance, the Remain in Mexico policy to continue. I'm not quite sure how they understand that, because that doesn't seem like compassion. I don't see the compassion in this.
I've been saying that for months. You're exactly right, that the compassion that this country has to help people in every community that I've ever seen, and being in the military, I've been stationed all over the United States, and the compassion that we have as Americans to help people is above any country in the world. And the policy that this administration has gone with, or should I say the lack of policies, is inhumane. It's inhumane because it gives people a false hope. And now you see a refugee camp and many others like that along our southern border forming, where it's just the opposite of compassion. You're so right.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I wanted to ask you a question too, because when people are coming through to apply for asylum, and I know that there's like certain points, certain criteria that must be met in order for that to be processed and for those people to be granted admittance through asylum. But when you have, especially this last week, when the majority on a number of days were Haitians, and the majority of those Haitians were coming from Brazil or Chile, and I saw photos all online of just card after card, photo identity cards from people who were from Haiti, but maybe 5 to 10 years ago immigrated to Chile. They got jobs and were granted asylum, were working in Santiago and other parts of the country, and then they decide now that they want to try to get asylum in the United States. I don't think I don't know how they try to do that when you've already been granted asylum in another country that most definitely is not Haiti.
That's exactly right. That's what President Trump worked so hard for with the agreements with Northern Triangle countries, with the Remain in Mexico policy. If you see some of the pictures, you'll see a bunch of trash, white pieces of paper on the ground, just on the American side of the river, on our border. And what those are the documents. Those are the legal documents, the visas, and the legal documents that the Haitians use for entry into Chile, Venezuela, and other South and Central American countries. And so then to be able to come into this country and claim asylum, they've already done that somewhere else. They've lived there for years. In some cases, people that I talked to on that day, on Saturday, had been there up to 10 years. And so this is where the policies of this administration are failing, because they're not addressing the root cause of these issues, and they're not working with other governments. You know, we heard Biden say before he got elected, well, we're going to, redo all our relationships. Well, our relationships with these countries are worse now. And they are being, the hemorrhaging of illegal immigration and trafficking that's going through these countries at record paces, 40 to 60,000 that we know are now on the way. It's because of our policies. And we need to hold those governments accountable, and we need to have good agreements with them. And when they claim asylum in another country, that's where they need to stay.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, the sheer numbers. And then, of course, Congressman, we hear that there's another group of migrants coming, and apparently the majority of this group, I think they said anywhere from like 4,000 to 5,000 strong. Majority of these are also Haitian that are coming from some of these other countries where they've already been granted asylum. So what's going to happen when we have a repeat of these numbers at the border here in the next week or so?
Well, we're going to have a repeat, and this is one of the reasons that I say it's way worse than you can imagine. The concerns that the Border Patrol agents talked to me about in Del Rio, Texas last week was exactly that you should see what is coming, what's behind this group. I mean, that was 15,000 people. You should see what's behind them. What we have seen in every month since Biden has been president is an increase in the number of illegal immigrants that are being contacted and apprehended in the United States. And so we have every reason to believe that that's going to continue. And now we know that all they're doing is processing them faster. I mean, there's so much to be done here. the governor of Texas is having to step in. DPS troopers are having to be sent down there. And you see, meanwhile, the Biden administration is trying to change the narrative to say, well, you can't do your job. And they're trying to make up issues that in the end don't support our own agents to enforce the laws that we have on the books. And that's really the issue that we face right now.
Yeah, that's it. You mentioned our state, Texas, Congressman. What's going to happen to all of our tax dollars? Because as I understand it, the governor's using, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, something like $3 billion to help deal with this, and whether it is sending agents down or some Border Patrol agents or trying to do whatever they can that they're able to do. Can we send an invoice to the Biden administration? Just, I don't know, maybe I'm just trying to figure out where to send our invoices to get a return on the tax dollars that we're spending, because that seems like a reverse violation of the 10th Amendment.
Well, for Texans, it's a double tax, and I've introduced a piece of legislation that is aimed at exactly that, to reimburse the state of Texas for the several $2 to $3 billion that are being spent on DPS troopers, National Guard troops. Think about our hospitals and our schools. Those are the kinds of things that are real cost to the state of Texas. We pay federal taxes, but we also, in our state budget, are now having to do what the federal government will not do. And I mentioned this to Secretary Mayorkas, and I said, the federal government has abdicated their responsibility to protect our southern border. And it made him very mad, but the numbers don't lie. And the policies have caused this directly. Texas should be reimbursed. And I dare say that other states like Arizona, New Mexico, and California are probably in a similar situation, but for sure Texas.
Yeah. And last question for you. In any other situation where you would have a federal program that the federal government wants the state to operate, but yet does not give the state those resources to do so. I mean, states in the past have successfully sued. I mean, there's Supreme Court precedents on this. Do you think that that's a possibility for the state of Texas and these other border states to do the same thing? Because now all these people, these states are being forced to implement quasi-implement what the federal government is supposed to be doing. Of course, they have to just catch and release because the federal government's not going to allow anyone to be detained. But to me, that seems like it would be similar enough to make the case. I don't know. I just wanted to get your final thoughts on that.
No, absolutely. It's an unfunded mandate. That's exactly what it is. The policies are creating costs that are incurred at the local level and the state level. My district is feeling it, whether it's car crashes. I mean, just this week we had a car full of 5 or 6 illegal immigrants, Haitians. There was a 6-month-old, tragic. I mean, just absolutely tragic, that was ejected out of the window and killed immediately because they were running from the law enforcement. These are unfunded mandates that are being caused by the Biden administration. Our local communities are paying for this. We're not getting reimbursed. That's why I introduced legislation, and I hope that it'll be bipartisan, that we can get people on there that understand that it's these policies that are causing us to have to pay more and do a job that should be done by the federal government. We need the president to step up and to actually get a clue about what's going on at the southern border.
Gosh, it's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking and infuriating because it could be avoided. Congressman Austin Fluger, thank you so much, and so glad that you introduced that bill on that as well. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
So coming up, the president moved the goalpost again when talking about what it's going to take to get the country back to normal after the worst of the pandemic. Stay with us. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company that serves premium coffee to people who love America. They develop their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus that they've learned while serving our great nation. And with every purchase you make, Black Rifle Coffee gives back. So in 2020, they donated over 6 million cups of coffee to veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. Their high-quality coffee beans are imported all the way from Colombia and Brazil and then carefully roasted at their facilities in Tennessee and Utah. They even have a signature roast called Lava Panther that's directly sourced from a small farm in Guatemala. So although the temperatures are cooling off, don't forget to keep enjoying the great outdoors fueled by Black Rifle Coffee. And the best way to do it is the Black Rifle Coffee Club. And when you join, your chosen brew is roasted, packaged, and shipped free to your door. And you can get special discounts on a bunch of other stuff as well. Purchase at blackriflecoffee.com/Dana and use code Dana at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Well, one of America's leading scientists spoke out, letting us know what percentage of Americans need to be vaccinated in order to get back to normal. That scientist's name is Joe Biden. We'll go straight to the video because if we're going to get back to normal, we have to follow the science. meaning Fauci, because he's literally science. And Joe Biden is now America's leading expert in medicine and science. So here he is telling us the latest on the percentage of people that need to be vaccinated. Watch.
I think we get the vast majority, like is going on in some industries and some schools, 97, 98%. I think we're awful close. But I'm not the scientist. I think, but one thing for certain, a quarter of the country can't go unvaccinated, and us not continue to have a problem.
Do you see? That's right, because your vaccine isn't going to work unless other people get their vaccine. Just like if you get a drink, you can't get drunk unless someone else gets a drink and gets drunk, because then that doesn't cue your drunk to get you drunk unless they drink and get drunk. That's how that works. Now, this is from the same science. This is from the same administration that tells us the $3.5 trillion spending bill costs nothing. And now comes this new goalpost in order for us to get back to normal. Remember the good old days when it was 15 days to slow the spread? And when scientists said that we needed 70% of the people vaccinated to return to normal? And then now it's what? $15,000 fine, and everybody, 90,000% have to get vaccinated? Fauci fudged up. And then he admitted to the New York Times that he was engaged in noble lying, something that Saint Fauci is fond of. I love it. You just put noble in front of something bad and it makes it good, right? Noble theft, noble lying, noble assault. Jeez. So when he said, actually, it might need to be something like 80%. Fauci said this at the time, by the way, when they were moving the numbers. He said, quote, "We really don't know what the real number is. I think the real range is somewhere between 70 and 90%, but I'm not going to say 90%, end quote." Well, now our new self-appointed chief scientist, Dr. Scientist Joe Biden, has seen St. Anthony's 90% and raised it on the basis of what science, we have no clue. I don't know, 97, 98? But hey, as Joe says, he isn't a scientist, but he is. He identifies as one. So do I. Just call me doctor. So guys, can we just say it? We're just pulling stuff out our butts now, okay? We're making it all up. Let's be real. And can we talk about any kind of side effect for just a hot second, but without people freaking out and being like, this isn't me? Shut up. Take a look at this close-up of Joe Biden's arm. Can we talk about this? Does this booster come with Rogaine? I mean, look at his arm. It's getting there. It's getting there. Let it go. Do you see the hair? I mean, maybe we could solve male pattern baldness with what's ever happening with his arm here. That hair's not from the vaccine. I'm totally kidding. I have to say that because YouTube censors will completely come after me. They're notorious for their lack of education and humor. I'm joking. That's an impressive shag carpet that's growing on his shoulder. Jiminy Christmas. They put 2 Band-Aids on him, and I'm like, that's going to suck to get off in a little bit later. So in any case, can we just admit that there's no plan to return to normal ever? Because a normal would be a world in which actual scientists told us real vaccination percentages to return to a normal. And actually, the vaccine wouldn't be called a vaccine, it would be called a therapeutic, because it doesn't actually inoculate you, and there's no genetic sequencing that's being performed on it to actually match it to whatever mutation happens next. No, instead we have our often incoherent president who falls asleep in White House meetings. Normal would be an America where we don't force people to inject crap, and we don't shame people if they don't want an injection for whatever reason. It's none of your business. Normal would be acknowledging natural immunity as scientific fact. But apparently now we're not. Normal would not be a world where people had to show their vax passport to eat or to go to a bar or shop like they do in New York. So can we just be straight up about this? Normal is just a carrot that's tossed out to pacify people, to get them to put up with all of these new demands and authoritarian moves from the government. Just do this and we'll get back to normal. But at every step and at every turn, they move the goalpost. I'm tired of playing the damn game. Yet this is the way they've always done it. And that's the way it's always going to continue to be until people say enough is enough and demand that we actually do return to normal and we follow science. We've done more to accelerate this country's descent into Marxism this decade. Actually, we probably took a decade or 2 decades off of that time by submitting to all of this authoritarian nonsense that doesn't follow science. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in, and it's good to have another year. Good night, and don't bend the knee.